Okay, here we go. We're back and doing some stuff or whatever. Here we go. Here. We're reading through Project 2025 and sound check. Check. Okay, we're good. Anywho, um, we are having some minor issues with the Notes app. Um, it shouldn't be, but there you have it. Like, I don't know what the problem is. Um, yeah, because like I know multiple people are in it, but we usually don't kind of have any issues with this. Also, the patient in question is right here. I don't know if y'all can see. This is baby Anna right here at my side. My little baby, my darling. It's been a rough week, y'all. It's been a rough week. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. I ain't gonna hold you. It's been a rough fucking week. Okay. Um, my little sweet baby Chooch over here. My little sweet baby Chooch, my Choochie Boochie, my little smoochy coochie coo, is having some issues. She's my little baby, as you guys know. Anna is very special to me, and I'm having a rough one with this. So, positive vibes are appreciated. One sec. I'm not sure what, like, all right. I don't know what the problem is because, again, we're all supposed to be able to see this. We're all supposed to be able to use this app. Real quick, I'm gonna look for something here. Let's look and see if whiteboard is down by chance. Okay. Buh, buh. Let's see here. What the fuck? Okay. Okay, this is really strange. Like our whiteboard app is just like cooked. One sec. Excuse me. Mother. Okay. One sec. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna check this. Okay. Okay. Jamspace whiteboard is having issues. Okay. Jamspace. Oh. Yep. Okay, we're having issues. I can see this. Okay. Is it just discontinued? Yeah, it might be. Nope. Nope. Nope, it's not. That's very strange. I'm not sure what the problem is. I apologize. Give me like one quick second because again, hey, I know, behold the horror. Jesus Christ, man. I can't all I can say. Yeah, I don't know what the heck the problem is with Notes app, but I'm really quick. I'm going to put in Discord. Again, just all the sorry, the PNG files if I can. The hell? What the hell? Okay, it's like I'm having problems. Okay, okay, that's all I can say. I will have to put that in just a minute. I'm having issues here, and I don't know what they are, frankly. Uh, but here we go. Let's just dive right back into reading this. And if anything, I can just literally take collaborative. Hey, maybe we can take collaborative like markdown notes or something. Ooh, that'd be fun. Hold on. Let's see. Ooh, this might be fun. Ooh, this might be fun. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. All right. Let's look up. Let's just look up Markdown. No, really? Obsidian, maybe? Ooh, really? Huh. Okay, no. I don't want to be shitty, but there's one Obsidian ant from Russia, and I'm just gonna say no thanks to that. No. I'm not even gonna play. Nope. Hold on a sec. Oh, not OS. They have not OS here. Ha ha ha. You know what? I'll have to. Ooh, you can spin up servers and. Okay, I'm gonna have to look into that later. But it looks like you can spin up servers, and it looks like you can do like a collaborative notes situation on those servers in Discord. I don't know why Whiteboard has been a bitch lately, but it has. It really has. So, hey, why don't I go ahead? I have all of the I have all of the like PNG like files here saved in the Discord. So what the heck? So anyway, if you go into the general chat, all the picture files are in there of like every single whiteboard that we have. So haha, yay for me, doubling up on things just in case. All right, so pardon me. Okay. Wow. No, I do not want to see my own face. Thank you very much. Nope. I'm not trying to look at my own face. I'll get distracted. I'll get annoyed. No, no, no. God damn it. One sec. Jeez Louise. Okay. Phew. Covered up. I want to see it. So we're just going to open this up right here. We're like powering through this. I'm going to try to. What the? Yeah, I'm going to. Hey now. There we go. I'm going to try to speed read my way through it. Oh, and this is when I had really wanted to. I'd really wanted to take notes on. That's okay. I'll take notes on it later. So this is the Ben Carson portion of 2025. So, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development by Ben Carson, Senior, MD. If you know, you know. Let's just not. Okay, we know who he is, I hope. The U.S. Department, and by the way, of course, he was head of HUD, I think, in Trump's first administration, probably for a few days, right? I don't know for how long, but he was head of HUD. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, administers a web of federal programs with mandates that support access to home ownership and affordable rental housing, relieve temporary housing instability for homeless persons. I don't like the wording there. Preserve a stable inventory of public housing units and enforce mandates with powers to settle compliance matters ranging from housing quality standards to housing discrimination cases. Politicians across party lines use HUD to promise ever greater public benefits. In addition, HUD programs tend to perpetuate the notion of bureaucratically provided housing as a basic life need, and whether intentionally or not, fail to acknowledge that these public benefits too often have led to intergenerational poverty traps, have implicitly penalized family formation. I'm horrified reading this. I apologize for all of this. In traditional two-parent marriages, and discouraged work and income growth, thereby limiting upward mobility. A new conservative administration, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. right now in his second administration, will therefore need to reset HUD. This effort should specifically include a broad reversal of the Biden administration's persistent implementation of progressive ideologies across the department's programs. Implement an action plan across both process and people. This plan should include both the immediate redelegation of authority to a cadre of political appointees and the urgent implementation of administrative regulatory actions with respect to HUD policy and program eligibility. Yay. Sounds fucking delightful. God, I feel guilty reading this. Jesus. This is disgusting. Reverse HUD's mission creep? Oh, I think they mean scope creep, but whatever. I guess mission creep could be a term, but that's not happening at HUD. Come on. Reverse HUD's mission creep over nearly a century of program implementation dating from the department's New Deal forebears. HUD's new political leadership team will need to re-examine the federal government's role in housing markets across the nation and consider whether it is time for a reform, reinvention, and renewal that transfers department functions to separate federal agencies, states, and localities. Overview. HUD was created by the Housing and Urban Development Act of 1965, and since then has administered several programs that have been administered by the Housing and Home Finance Agency. I don't think I knew that. That's cool. That's good to know, at least. With a proposed fiscal year budget authority, I love that they're defining FY as fiscal year 3/4 of the way through this. Well done, guys. Anyway, it was a proposed fiscal year FY budget authority totaling $71.9 billion and 8326 full-time equivalent FTE employees. It remains the largest government agency charged with implementing federal housing policy, in addition to its headquarters in Washington, D.C., which I guess is bad. HUD has 10 regional offices as well as field offices and centers to implement specialized operational and enforcement responsibilities. HUD program offices also, scroll up here, interface with various networks of implementing organizations such as locally chartered public housing agencies, PHAs, and federal, state, and local government and judicial bodies, as well as such private industry participants as mortgage lenders. That's true. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development can delegate authority to various entities across an array of HUD programs. The Secretary also oversees the Office of the Deputy Secretary, the Office of Hearings and Appeals, the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, and the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. That's what I say about that. Ugh.
Bruh.
Otherwise known as CFB-NP. The Office of the Secretary also comprises a team of politically appointed positions and career support staff. Each of the following offices should be headed by political appointees, except where otherwise noted. Office of Administration, headed by the Chief Administration Officer. The Office of Administration has responsibilities for the Office of the Chief Human Capital Officer, OCHO, headed by the Chief Human Capital Officer, currently a career position. I guess that's bad. We don't want career public servants, do we? And the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer, CPO, headed by the Chief Procurement Officer, currently a career position. Wow, that's awful. Let's get them out of here. Career professionals knowing what they're doing. Get them out. Get them out. I'm sorry, but come on. Office of the Chief Financial Officer, headed by the Chief Financial Officer. You don't say. Tell us more. Office of the Chief Information Officer. Ooh, I'm going to assume that that office might be headed by the Chief Information Officer. Oh gosh, I was right. I can read minds. I'm psychic. Headed by the Chief Information Officer. Office of Public Affairs, headed by a Senate-confirmed Assistant Secretary, AS, or Principal Deputy Secretary, PDA. Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary? PDAS. Oh, what? Okay. All right. Fine. Fair enough. It's weird, but okay. Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations, CIR, headed by a Senate-confirmed AS or Principal DAS. CPD administers various entitlement and non-entitlement programs across community development, disaster recovery, and housing for the homeless, and individuals with special needs, including housing opportunities for people with AIDS. HOPWA. The two largest CPD administered programs are the Community Development Block Grants, CDBG, program, which includes disaster recovery funding and the home investment. I read it for a minute as home invasion. That's not what we're doing. Home investment partnerships program, home, HOME. CPD's Relocation and Real Estate Division, RRED, has departmental delegated authority for the Uniform Relocation Assistance and Real Property Acquisition Policies Act of 1970. Office of Public and Indian Housing, PIH, headed by a Senate-confirmed AS or PDAS. PIH administers public housing and tenant-based rental assistance programs, as well as authorities for Native American and Native Hawaiian housing assistance and loan guarantee programs under the Native American Housing Assistance and Loan Guarantee Programs under the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act. Okay, isn't that pretty old? The Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act? Tenant-based rental assistance represents the major portion of HUD's, Housing and Urban Development, of course. That's what this section is on. So tenant-based rental assistance represents the major portion of HUD's non-emergency discretionary budget. I guess we're about to hear why that's bad. HUD describes its housing choice voucher program as, quote, an essential component of the federal housing safety net for people in need, unquote. PIH also implements funding for the Self-Sufficiency Coordinator Program, the Public Housing Fund, operating and capital funds for PHA, administration of Section 9 public housing and Section 8 voucher programs. Sorry. Some shit's going on outside. Okay. Sorry, I'm reading through this too. Voucher programs. Huh. Okay. There are fucking a bunch of kids playing in my backyard right now. It's great. We'll just back up. HUD describes its housing choice voucher program as an essential component of the federal housing safety net for people in need. PIH also implements funding for the Self-Sufficiency Coordinator Program. The Public Housing Fund, operating in capital funds for PHA administration of Section 9 public housing and Section 8 voucher programs and choice neighborhoods zeroed out during the Trump administration, Part 1. Budget request, but included in HUD's FY, that's fiscal year 2023. Thanks for defining it 3/4 of the way through this document. Great job, guys. Not that nobody knows what FY means. We understand what FY means. Anyway, I swear these kids think that, like, because my blinds are down, I, like, can't see them. Please, stop. Not right behind my house. Like, play in the green area, but let's have it not be right behind my house. It worries me when I'm gonna have to put the dog out there and have him go to the bathroom. He's gonna be anxious. Hi, kitty, are you okay? It's just a lot. You know, I'm child free, no offense, just, you know. Anyway, PIH also implements funding for the Self-Sufficiency Coordinator Program, the Public Housing Fund, like we said, operating in capital funds for PHA. I gotta help Anna get down here. One sec, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Careful. Whew. Okay. Good girl, Anna. There you are, favorite. My little favorite kitty. PIH also implements funding for the Self-Sufficient Program, the Public Housing Fund, operating in capital funds for PHA administration of Section 9 public housing and Section 8 voucher programs, and choice neighborhoods zeroed out during the Trump administration Part 1 budget request, but included in HUD's fiscal year 2023 budget, which requests $250 million for the program. Honestly, that doesn't seem like much for housing. It seems like we could spend more. Hello? Open it up. People need housing. It's a human fucking right. Anyway, what do I know? Office of Housing and Federal Housing Administration, FHA, headed by a dual-hatted Senate-confirmed AS and Federal Housing Commissioner or Acting Federal Housing Commissioner. The Office of Housing oversees implementation of the department's project-based rental assistance, PBRA, multifamily housing portfolio, Section 202 supportive housing for the elderly program, Section 811 program for disabled persons, housing and housing counseling assistance program. The Federal Housing Administration administers the Mutual Mortgage Insurance Program, MMIF. I got cat fur in my mouth. I apologize. And various other mortgage, insurance, direct loan, and loan guarantee programs for single-family housing, multifamily housing, hospitals, and healthcare facilities that meet certain conditions. Government National Mortgage Association, GNMA, headed by a Senate-confirmed GNMA president or executive vice president. GNMA oversees more than $2 billion in federal guarantees to mortgage-backed securities. By the way, mortgage-backed securities, what got us into trouble in 2007, 2008, just, before that housing market crashed, right? That was mortgage-backed securities and, bespoke tranches or groups of these, again, these bespoke mortgage-backed securities and bespoke tranches, groups of those mortgage-backed securities that people would essentially invest in and buy up, and it collapsed the housing market. And obviously having all of these mortgages and mortgage-backed securities all rated AAA, even though a lot of them were what they would call ninja, disrespectfully, not my term. No income, no job available, or no job, no income, no job. So these ninja loans were rated AAA. They shouldn't have been, essentially. But they were put into these mortgage-backed securities, these tranches of mortgage-backed securities that essentially collapsed our entire housing economy and our economy in general in 2008. If you've not seen The Big Short, go watch it. It is an excellent movie. And it was written by the same author who's now up Sam Bankman-Fried's ass, but he was good for this book. We'll just, I don't want to be disrespectful, but come on. Why do you like Sam Bankman-Fried? He's a scammer, dude. My opinion, etc. But he still did a great job with this book. I'm not gonna lie. The Big Short. Definitely check it out. And so these mortgage-backed securities were essentially a terrible idea, but we haven't changed a lot in terms of how our housing market works. So I guess more information about The Big Short Part 2 incoming. We'll see what happens. Seriously, I've got concerns. I think a lot of us have concerns. And really, that's all I can say about it. But the mortgage-backed securities situation is a little troubling. Anyway, yeah. So they're pooled, as it says, from various federal programs, including mortgages backed by programs outside of HUD, principally the single-family mortgage guarantee programs administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA, and the Rural Housing Service at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA. FHA insured single-family housing mortgages comprise the largest share of GNMA guaranteed mortgage-backed securities. Anyway, Office of Departmental Equal Employment Opportunity, headed by a director. Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, we're still breaking things down here. FHEO, headed by a Senate-confirmed AS or PDAS. The Assistant Secretary for FHEO is the designated HUD official responsible for enforcing Title 6, not Title 9, Title 6 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and Section 109 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 after informal efforts to resolve noncompliance, as the AS for FHEO may make a formal finding of noncompliance and initiate enforcement action before an administrative tribunal or a referral to the Department of Justice. Next is, look at it, Office of General Counsel, OGC, headed by the General Counsel or Principal Deputy General Counsel. OGC handles department-wide legal and compliance oversight advice with supervision responsibilities for the Deputy General Counsel for Housing Programs, Deputy General Counsel for Housing Operations, and Deputy General Counsel for Enforcement and Fair Housing, as well as the Departmental Enforcement Center. So again, we're stacking the OGC, the Office of General Counsel, right? That's their plan from the top down, from the president's office in the executive branch all the way down, so that we can essentially weave our way in between things we might need congressional or Senate approval for. So that is why we are so obsessed in this document with the OGC. Okay. We're obsessed with it because that's the way that the Heritage Foundation seems to have found to get around all of the unfortunate little, unimportant strictures like, I don't know, following the Constitution, silly stuff really like that. Just small potatoes, just small stuff like that. Yeah, nothing big, just, following the Constitution. Ew, am I right? Make it stop. We don't need rules around here. Come on. Where we're going, we don't need rules. And truly, that's essentially what they're saying. Like, snark aside. But yeah, their OGC gambit is really fucking weird, but it does seem to be working to some extent, right? Because about, 60% or so of Project 2025 has already been implemented in the first year and a half of Donald Trump's second term. So there's that. Back to this, though. Then we've got the Office of Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control. Do away with that, right? Who cares about lead poisoning? Fuck them kids. OHHLHC, headed by a director. Okay, and that's bad, I guess. Headed by a director, get rid of them. We don't need those career officials. We don't need no career public officials around here. So anyway, portion of HUD is headed by a director, Office of Healthy Homes and Lead Hazard Control. It was established in the early 1990s to eliminate lead-based paint hazards in America's privately owned and low-income housing, address healthy housing initiatives, and enforce lead-based paint regulations authorized under the Residential Lead-Based Paint Hazard Reduction Act of 1982, Title 10 of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1992. These functions overlap with similar functions of the Environmental Protection Agency, also authorized to enforce lead-based paint regulations under Title 10. And the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Healthy Homes Initiative, Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program, and a National Asthma Control Program. Office of Policy Development and Research, PDR, headed by a Senate-confirmed AS or PDAS. PDR was established in the early 1970s and today administers research activities, including external contract research grants, and provides analytical and policy advice to senior HUD staff. PDR also provides publicly available statistics to the American Housing Survey, AHS, which is sponsored by HUD and conducted by the Census Bureau in the state of the city's data systems, data on the low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC, and annual fair market rents, and it's like the fair market keeps being pushed up because of these colluding, allegedly, landlords. Anyway, but they do issue fair market value information. So if you're interested, I assume they're still publishing it. Maybe I shouldn't in 2026. God, I don't know why these kids have to run back and forth between houses like a bazillion times. Stay at one fucking house for like 2 seconds. How about that? No? Nope. Too hard? Okay, never mind. Oh, yikes. Yeah, no, it just causes Toby anxiety, and it's just a lot of like goofing around. Come on. They cut through like hundreds of times some days. I'm like, cool out, okay? Go around, calm down. But anyway, also, I don't really want them getting hurt on my property. So there's that. That concerns me. But what are you going to do? So interestingly enough, okay. Oh, we've got the OIG in here too. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, we've got the data on the low income housing tax credit, LIHTC, and fair market rents and income limits data. But I was going to say, interestingly enough, they appear to still be publishing fair market rent information. So just Google fair market rent data, HUD, and you should be able to find it. So if you're looking for what the fair market value is in your area for a particular, I don't know, like 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment, whatever, that takes dogs and cats, give it a look. As long as they're still airing it by the time you look, who knows? They might publish it, they might not. Okay, data sets and characteristics of families assisted under the HUD program. So it's just keeping track of what types of people and who is being, I guess we should say who, because large swaths of people, who's being assisted under the HUD programs. Office of Inspector General, OIG, headed by an Inspector General. The OIG is independent of HUD and one of 12 Inspectors General across the federal government, authorized under the Inspector General Act of 1978. Operating under its own budget, authority, and strategic plan, the HUD OIG conducts internal and external audits and investigations of HUD programs and operations. While independent of HUD and holding no enforcement powers over HUD programs, HUD OIG works closely with the, sorry, my eyes are bothering me, Office of General Counsel, the Department Enforcement Center, and HUD program offices. The Inspector General serves as an advisor to and non-voting member of the FHA Mortgage Review Board. But yeah, I was going to say non-voting member, but advisor. Okay, all right. These little fuckers. Sorry. Office of Field Policy and Management, FPM, headed by an Assistant Deputy Secretary for FPM. FPM supports the Secretary through regional and and field office communications and external engagement with various community stakeholders to ensure the successful implementation of secretarial initiatives and special projects. What external community stakeholders? Like, be specific, give us some examples. Otherwise, it's just a bullet point list. Like, what are you doing? Is this all he's going to do in this section? I mean, hopefully, at least he's going to go on about how evil it is to be doing all the socialisms and giving people help and making sure people have roofs over their heads. Hopefully, it's not just a bullet point list of what's already happening. But we shall see. We shall see. So, secretarial initiatives and special projects. So, HUD reform pillars. Ideally, Congress, okay, there we go, would redelegate authorities that have been diverted to HUD's administrative bureaucracy and safeguard taxpayers against the mission creep that inevitably occurs when Congress delegates power to an empowered and unelected bureaucracy that is insulated by civil service protections. If implemented, the reforms proposed in this chapter can help a new conservative administration, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. right now, in part 2. Trump admin part 2. To use its Article 2 powers to rectify bureaucratic overreach. Okay. Reverse the expansion of programs beyond their statutory authority and end progressive policies that have been put in place at the department. This is such an anemic section. Ben Carson doesn't seem to give a fuck. Anyway, it is hoped that a future Congress under conservative leadership will enact legislative reforms of HUD programs With or without congressional action, however, it is vital that a conservative administration immediately institute guardrails across HUD programs to remove the administrative state's bureaucratic overreach of Article 1 authorities, thereby ensuring formal execution of Article 2 process and personnel reforms of the sort outlined below. First day and first year administrative reforms. A new conservative administration, i.e., Donald Trump Part 2, right now, can and should implement the following reforms that focus on both people and process. The implementation of these reforms simply requires courageous political leadership like you, Ben Carson. Across all of HUD's key appointed positions, HUD political leadership should immediately assign all delegated powers to politically appointed PDAS, DAS, and other office leadership positions. Sorry. Making sure my cat doesn't need help getting up here. HUD political leadership should immediately assign all delegated powers to politically appointed, PDAS, DAS, and other official leadership positions. Change any current career leadership positions into political and non-career appointment positions. In what way? Aren't they trying to get around Senate and congressional oversight? Anyway. And use senior executive service, SES, transfers to install motivated and aligned leadership. The president should issue an executive order making the HUD secretary a member of the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., which will gain broader oversight authorities to address foreign threats, particularly from China. Okay, fair enough. With oversight of foreign ownership of real estate in both rental and ownership markets of single-family and multifamily housing. Like, that's not the worst idea I've heard, but I'm sure it gets worse later on somehow. I'm sure they'll somehow absolutely beef this later on. With trillions worth of real estate secured across HUD's portfolio. Okay. The secretary should initiate so they're basically looking at HUD as like an investment opportunity. The secretary should initiate a HUD task force consisting of politically appointed personnel to identify and reverse all actions taken by the Biden administration to advance progressive ideology. The Office of the Secretary, the leadership in the Office of General Counsel should conduct a thorough review of all sub-regulatory guidance that has been instituted outside the Administrative Procedure Act, APA. Additionally, departmental leadership should 1. Immediately end the Biden administration's property appraisal and valuation equity policies, PAVE, and reverse any Biden administration actions that threaten to undermine the integrity of real estate appraisals. Repeal climate change initiatives and spending in the department's budget request. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, repeal the affirmatively furthering fair housing AFFH regulation reinstituted under the Biden administration and any other uses of special purpose credit authorities to further equity. 4, eliminate the new housing supply fund. Sounds great. The Office of the Secretary should recommend proposed regulation put forward under the Trump administration that would prohibit non-citizens, including all mixed status families, from living in all federally assisted housing. HUD statutory obligations should include providing housing for American citizens who are in need. Jesus Christ, I did not mean to fucking do that. One sec. I'm goofing around on this. Hold on. I didn't mean to do that. So, interesting. So we're saying this is only for U.S. citizens. We don't want you, etc., etc. Okay. HUD reforms must also ensure alignment with reforms implemented by other federal agencies where immigration status impacts public programs, certainly to include any reforms in the public charge regulatory framework and administered by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, DHS. Local welfare organizations, not the federal government, should step up to provide welfare for the housing of non-citizens. So they're saying farm it out to private companies and private, like, NGOs and churches and what have you. What could possibly go wrong? That's really sad. Anyway, the Office of the Secretary should execute regulatory and sub-regulatory guidance actions across HUD programs and applicable to all relevant stakeholders that would restrict program eligibility when a mission would threaten the protection of the life and health of individuals and fail to encourage upward mobility and economic advancement through what the fuck? Hold on one sec. We gotta kick a motherfucker out. Alrighty. Ban. Okay. Interesting. Okay, I want to back this up. The Office of the Secretary should execute regulatory and sub-regulatory guidance actions across HUD programs and applicable to all relevant stakeholders that would restrict program eligibility when admission would threaten the protection of the life and health of individuals, to fail to encourage upward mobility and economic advancement through household self-sufficiency. Where admissible in regulatory action, HUD should implement reforms reducing the implicit anti-marriage bias in housing assistance programs. Strengthen work and work readiness requirements, like they did with the Big Beautiful Bill. That probably was in the Big Beautiful Bill, to be honest with you. We'll look and see. Implement maximum term limits for the residents in PBRA and TBRA programs. The end housing first policy, so that the department prioritizes mental health and substance abuse issues before jumping to permanent interventions in homelessness. Hey, you know what would be really helpful in not having an addiction? Having a fucking house to live in. You know, like, number one, have a place to live. Number two, work on self. Like, my goodness. Not the other way around. They don't have to prove they're worthy of having a roof over their head by, like, going to therapy, going to a doctor. That's absurd. That's a human right. It is a human right to have housing. Anyway, notwithstanding administrative reforms, it goes on to say Congress should enact legislation that protects life and like that kind of administration, and eliminates provisions in federal housing and welfare benefits policies that discourage work, marriage, and meaningful paths to upward economic mobility. The AS or PDAS for the Office of Policy Development and Research should suspend all external research and evaluation grants in the Office of Policy Development and Research and realign the to another office any functions that are not involved in the collection and use of data and survey administration functions and do not facilitate the execution of regulatory impact analysis studies. What? That's okay. So we're just trying to make it smaller, just for the sake of making the office smaller, I guess. Moving on, FHA leadership should increase the mortgage insurance premium, MIP, for all products above 20-year terms and maintain MIP for all products below 20-year terms and all refinances. FHA should encourage wealth-building home ownership opportunities, which can be accomplished best through shorter duration mortgages. Shorter duration mortgages, as if people can afford that when they're struggling financially. Goes on to say, ideally, Congress would contemplate a fundamental revision of FHA's statutory restriction of single-family housing mortgage insurance to first-time homebuyers. Lovely. This would include, with support from HUD leadership, number one, moving the Home Equity Conversion Mortgages HECM program once again to its own special risk insurance fund. Oh, great. 2, revising loan limit determinations. 3, providing statutory flexibility for shorter-term projects that amortize principal earlier and faster. How is that going to work for people who are in financial hardship? Pardon me, that's my question. Anywho, goes on to say statutorily restricting eligibility for first-time homebuyers and abandoning the affirmative obligation authorities erected for the single-family housing programs across federal agencies and government-sponsored enterprises. So fuck you if you need a mortgage, essentially. And, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a first-time home buyer or not. We don't want to help you. We don't want to help you. That's what we're saying here. That's bizarre. I want to reread that. Statutorily restricting eligibility for first-time homebuyers and abandoning the affirmative obligation authorities erected for the single-family housing programs across federal agencies and government-sponsored enterprises. Jesus Christ, that's pretty wide-reaching. The HUD secretary should move the HUD Real Estate Assessment Center, REAC, from PIH to the Office of Housing, which already implements property standards in its multifamily housing lending programs through the multifamily accelerated processing MAP lending guidelines. I knew they were going to try to put them into another mortgage program that was not what they needed, right? If you're a struggling person trying to buy a home, you have to be put into a whole new category. It doesn't matter what you need, go over there, is essentially what they're saying. Get out of here, go over there. We don't want you. Giving HUD the authority to streamline the enforcement of compliance with housing standards across the federal government and flexibility for physical inspections through private accreditation should also be considered. This all sounds to me like make it easier for us to make money on these mortgage-backed securities. Please, we don't care about actually providing housing. We want money. That's what I'm hearing. Let me know if you disagree. HUD should maintain its requested budget authority for modernization initiatives that are applicable to the Office of the Chief Information Officer and program offices across the department. Longer-term policy reform considerations. Congress has charged HUD principally with mandates for construction of the nation's affordable housing stock, in addition to setting and enforcing standards for decent housing and fair housing enforcement. Regardless of intent, HUD's efforts have yielded mixed results at best. Gosh, I wonder if that has anything to do with all the cuts y'all are making. No, couldn't possibly. Anyway, moving on. Even today, more than a half century after Congress put enforcement of so-called fair housing in the hands of HUD, bureaucracy, implementation of this policy is muddled by the repeated application of affirmative race-based policies. Also, the production mandate for HUD's housing portfolio has waned for decades, with the department effectively working to maintain the public housing portfolio from the late 1990s when the Faircloth Amendment capped HUD's public housing portfolio. Okay, so again, don't cap that portfolio. We want to make money off of it. Kind of what I was thinking. Kind of where I was thinking they were going with this. Longer-term reforms of HUD rental assistance programs should encourage choice and competition for renters. Encourage participation by landlords where appropriate, and encourage all non-elderly able-bodied adults to move towards self-sufficiency by kicking them off of the program is what I'm getting here. Got it. This can be pursued through regulations and legislative reforms that seek to strengthen the work requirements, limit the period during which households are eligible for housing benefits, and add flexibility to rent payment terms to facilitate flexibility on the landlord side, of course, right? Got it. To facilitate the movement of households toward self-sufficiency. Obviously, using government vouchers or other such programs to expand housing choice options is not without its downsides. Yeah, for the people fucking getting them. Yeah, not for you, Ben Carson. You're fine. Thank you. The turn toward mobility vouchers constitutes an abandonment of America's public housing stock, and efforts to increase competition in the public housing market must not come at the expense of local autonomy and the ability of cities, towns, neighborhoods, and communities to choose for themselves the sort of housing they want to allow. Freedom of association and self-government at the most. I knew there'd be some batshit libertarian stuff here. Anyway, freedom of association and self-government at the most local level possible must remain primary considerations in any conservative effort to increase competition in the public housing market. Congress should also consider those areas in which federal policy negatively interacts with private markets, including when federal policy crowds out private sector development and exacerbates affordability challenges that persist across the nation. It is essential that legislation provides states and localities maximal flexibility to pursue locally designed policies and minimize the likelihood of federal preemption of local land use and zoning decisions. In the same manner, Congress should prioritize any and all legislative support for the single-family home. Homeownership forms the backbone of the American dream. The purchase of a home is the largest investment most Americans will make in their lifetimes, and homeownership remains the most accessible way to build generational wealth for millions of Americans. For these reasons, American homeowners and citizens know best what is in the interest of their neighborhoods and communities. Localities, rather than the federal government, must have the final say in zoning laws and regulations. And a conservative administration, i.e., Donald Trump, i.e., right now, should oppose any efforts to weaken single-family zoning. Along the same lines, Congress can propose tax credits for the renovation or repair of housing stock in rural areas so that more Americans are able to access the American dream of home ownership. Are you fucking kidding me, Ben Carson? Additionally, enhanced statutory authorities for local autonomy should extend to the prioritizing of federal rental assistance, subsidies that emphasize choice and mobility in housing, voucher subsidies over static site-based subsidies, and provide authority for maximal flexibility to direct PHA land sales that involve the existing stock of public housing units. Congress must consider the future of the public housing model. At best, any new public investments will provide maintenance funds to bring substandard housing units and properties up to livable standards, but will still fail to address larger aims of upward mobility and dynamism for local housing markets, because we were worried about the markets, not people who need housing. Ew. Fuck them people who need housing. Fuck them people who need that housing. We want money from the market. This is kind of gross, in my opinion, but let me know what y'all think. Anyway, and dynamism for local housing markets where land can be sold by PHAs and put to greater economic use. Bah! What? Fuck! Bah! Thereby benefiting entire local economies through greater private investment, productivity, and employment opportunities, and increased tax revenue. Any long-term view of HUD's future must include maintaining these strong financial operations and reliable reporting that are needed to run a $50 billion per year agency. Before the Trump administration, HUD effectively did not even have a chief financial officer, CFO, for 8 years. And HUD's financial infrastructure inevitably deteriorated. Yeah, couldn't it be anything to do with like the cuts, though, right? Like that the Republicans keep voting on? No, nothing to do with that. Just, it's a bureaucracy, therefore bureaucracy bad. It's not like systemic or anything, right, Ben Carson? The department, he goes on to say, auditors were unable to conclude that HUD's internal operations are producing accurate financial reporting. The auditors had identified multiple material weaknesses and significant deficiencies in the department's internal financial controls. Overall, the deterioration of HUD's financial infrastructure led to a lack of accountability with respect to the use of taxpayer funds, as well as to pervasive difficulties with operations and program implementation. However, by hiring a new CFO, what is this, a private company? Hiring a new CFO, he says, from the private sector with a proven track record of visionary. I'm sorry, this sounds like it was written by ChatGPT. Sorry, I'll back up. However, by hiring a new CFO from the private sector with a proven track record of visionary leadership, HUD was able to implement an agency-wide governance structure that improved its financial processes and internal controls and harnessed the power of innovative new technologies to bring a modernized business mindset to the agency's financial infrastructure. By the end of the Trump administration, for the first time in nearly a decade, HUD was able to address all of its previously identified material weaknesses, and the auditors were able to issue their first clean audit report on HUD's financial statements and internal controls. Finally, and more fundamentally, what now? Congress should consider a wholesale overhaul of HUD that contemplates devolving many HUD functions to states and localities, with any remaining federal functions consolidated to other federal agencies. For example, by transferring loan guarantee programs to SBA, like you said just a while ago, moving Indian, that's Native peoples, housing programs to the Department of the Interior, moving rental assistance, mortgage, because Native people aren't just like people who need housing. There are special types of people who need to be moved over here to the Department of the Interior. Anyway, as a partially Native person, fuck you, Ben Carson. Just saying, as somebody whose family includes Iroquois, okay, and Wyandot, hearty fuck you to Ben Carson. Anyway, moving on. Department of the Interior, that's where all of the Indian housing programs are going to go, according to him. Moving rental assistance, mortgage insurance programs, and GNMA to a redesigned housing and home finance agency. Generally, this reform path could consolidate some programs, eliminate others, and that have failed, to produce meaningful long-term results, and narrow the scope of many programs so that they are closer to what they were when they were created. Sorry, backing that up. Generally, this reform path could consolidate some programs, eliminate others that have failed to produce meaningful long-term results or long-run results, as they say, and narrow the scope of many programs so that they are closer to what they were when they were created. That's odd. It just sounds like cut costs. That's all. But anyway, that's Ben Carson's section for you right there. Really quick, though, I want to check something. Jamie, can you run through Perplexity? Quick question. I'm just gonna run it through Claude. One sec. We're gonna scroll down here. Fuck me, this is a lot. Wow, this is a lot. Anyway, let's go ahead and ask Claude a couple of things. We're gonna ask Claude why my eyes hurt like a motherfucker right now. We're gonna ask Claude, were there any changes made to HUD that were implemented in the big, beautiful bill? I suspect there probably were, including things like work requirements and offloading Native peoples to the Department of the Interior. We're getting our answer. One sec, I'm just gonna share some of this on our Twitter X, because, you know, X is the everything app or whatever. Waiting for our response. Okay. So right now I'm getting the answer from Claude to my question, were there any changes made to HUD that were implemented in the big, beautiful bill? Sorry. It says, okay, this confirms the important distinction. What? Hold on. Are we still? No, that's a weird phraseology. This confirms the important distinction. Good, because a lot of the HUD cuts coverage floating around actually belongs to a different lane other than OBBBA itself was actually an OBBBA, the reconciliation bill signed July 4th, 2025. We know, Jesus Christ. Anyway, Claude's telling us since it went through budget reconciliation, it's limited to tax and mandatory spending provisions under the Byrd rule. Yeah, no shit. It couldn't touch discretionary programs like Section 8 vouchers directly. Now, that's true. What it did include, I'm going to say there are probably work requirements in there, but let's see, are essentially HUD adjacent. Low-income housing tax credit permanently restores the 9% credit allocation boost to 12.5% from a scheduled expiration and lowers the private activity bond financing threshold for 4% credits from 50% to 25%. Interesting. This raises the per capita ceiling from $3 to $3.36, effective 2026, estimated to enable roughly 1.22 million additional affordable homes over the next decade, allegedly. And again, probably a lot of that is because of the tranches of mortgage-backed securities that they're trying to invest in. Additional for affordable homes over the next decade per NLIHC Novogradac estimates. Opportunity zones made permanent with a recurring 10-year designation period starting in 2026 and automatically qualifies all tribal lands and defined rural areas as difficult development areas. HUD Secretary Scott Turner publicly touted this piece specifically. Green and Resilient Retrofit Program repeals unobligated funds for this HUD multifamily housing program, an actual rescission, not just a proposition. Yeah. Okay, and that's as far as enacted HUD law goes when it comes to the big beautiful bill. Oh wow, but it says that the administration's fiscal year 2026 budget requested proposed eliminating tenant-based Section 8 vouchers completely, project-based Section 8, and public housing fund combined over $68.7 billion, replacing them with a state rental assistance program block grant. Both chambers voted in July 2025 to reject the 40% cut in block grants proposal, but hadn't passed a final spending bill. That's a good thing. The House fiscal year 2026 bill would have cut HUD by $2.2 billion. The Senate version increased it by $3.3 billion over fiscal year 2025. As of the most recent NLIHC update, the final fiscal year 2026 HUD spending bill landed roughly $7.3 billion above the prior year. Okay, all right. At $77.3 billion total, the opposite direction of the 44% cut. Okay, I'm not complaining. Headlines that were circulating back in mid 2025, which were based on the skinny budget request, were not what got enacted. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Work requirements, time limits are also floating around as regulatory proposals in the House Committee draft policy riders, which would let HUD give PHAs broad flexibility to waive statutory requirements, potentially enabling work requirements and time limits. Again, not something backed by the big, beautiful bill, but it's something they're still trying to do. And so I guess the bottom line is big, beautiful bill just narrowed tax code footprints for things like HUD. And then there was one rescission that we just discussed. And then the Section 8 gutting, the 2-year cap, block grant stuff, all of that, that's proposed by the White House budget. But it's been fought over and thus far been told absolutely not to, which is a good thing. That doesn't mean that they're not keeping this going downstream, though. They're reintroducing these proposals. So let's not feel like we're too safe just yet, right? Let's not feel like we're too safe just yet. Okay, there we go. 1 sec. Fuck. Okay, people keep getting kicked out. I apologize for that. I don't know what the problem is, but I do apologize for that. Gosh darn it. Hold on a sec. I think I see what part of the issue is. Anyway, I think we're good. I think we're good to go. Let's get back to it. Essentially, all of these proposed changes are still coming down the pipeline. So, Department of the Interior. Oh, really, really quick. Really quick. I do want to check something out here. What the one sec. Okay. Now, I want to ask Claude because we're having issue. Yep, we're having issues with our note-taking app. Would you mind? Like it's gonna mind, right? No, we won't do it. That's what it'll say. Would you mind providing notes for Ben Carson's HUD section of project 2025? We'll say our like pirate, our notes app whiteboard via Discord isn't working. Okay, we'll see. It should produce something. So, Department of the Interior, William Perry Pendley. And I apologize for the fact that we keep getting like people kicked out of stream. I apologize. That's not great. I'm not sure what the problem is here. So, Department of the Interior, William Perry Pendley, the U.S. Department of the Interior, DOI, oversees, manages, and protects the nation's natural resources and cultural heritage, provides scientific and other information about those resources, and honors the nation's trust responsibilities or special commitments to American Indians, Alaskan Natives, and affiliated island communities. Agency overview: DOI's purview encompasses more than 500 million acres of federal lands, including national parks and national wildlife refuges. 700 million acres, wow, of subsurface minerals, 1.7 billion acres of the outer continental shelf. Huh, didn't know that. OCS, Outer Continental Shelf, 23% of the nation's energy, water in 17 western states, and trust responsibilities for 566 quote unquote Indian tribes and Alaskan natives. DOI's 2024 budget request totals $18.9 billion, an increase of $2 billion or 12% more than the 2023 enacted level. The budget also provides an estimated $12.6 billion in permanent funding in 2024. In 2024, DOI will generate receipts of $19.6 billion. Anyway, moving on. A home department has been considered in 1879. Hello, lady. 1789, not 1879, and urged by presidents over the decades until DOI's creation in 1849. Okay, interesting. The variety of its early responsibilities, the Indian Bureau, the General Land Office, the Bureau of Pensions, and the Patent Office, among others, earned it various nicknames, including Great Miscellany, Hydra-Headed Monster, and Mother of Departments. It's, okay, but this is Mother of Departments, but the Office of General Counsel is not. Got it, cool. Their weird Hydra of Office of General Counsel is not Mother of all Departments. Okay, got it. Its mission became more focused on natural resources with the rise of the conservation movement in the early 20th century. However, it kept its historic, since the days of the Founding Fathers, role as overseer of vast working landscapes involving grazing, logging, mining oil, and gas, and with the Bureau of Reclamation in 1902 as the nation's dam builder. Today, DOI has 70,000 employees in approximately 2,400 locations, with offices around the United States, Puerto Rico, and U.S. territories and freely associated states. Historically, DOI operation in a bipartisan manner consisted with the laws enacted by Congress pursuant to its powers under the Property Clause. Thus, DOI fulfilled its statutory responsibilities in a manner that ensured the ability of Western states, counties, and communities to be sustained by both economic and recreational activities on neighboring federal lands, especially given that in some rural Western counties, federal lands constituted 50, 60, 70, 80, even 90% of the county's landmass. That ended with the administration of President Jimmy Carter, who, beholden to environmental groups that supported his election, adopted DOI policies consistent with their demands, much the horror of Western governors, most of whom were Democrats. President Ronald Reagan campaigned against this war on the West. This war on the West, declared himself a sagebrush rebel, and on taking office, quelled the rebellion by reversing Carter administration policies. President George H.W. Bush distanced himself from Reagan's Western policies, committed to a kinder and gentler America, and proclaimed his desire to be the environmental president. With all the ties to like Enron and everything, right? With their family ties to all of that. You're just going to be the environmental president, as you do, which result, I guess we're just saying words now, which resulted in changes at his administration's DOI. Great job with the words, guys. Again, much to the dismay of Westerners, President Bill Clinton resumed Carter's war on the West, epitomized by the DOI's deploying of wolves into the states bordering. Yeah, he was deploying the wolves because he wanted to go to war with the West. Got it. Deploying of wolves into the states bordering Yellowstone National Park, the decreed death of a world-class mine in Montana, and the designation of a vast national monument in Utah over the objections of Utah leaders, but with the support of the Hollywood elite. By Hollywood elite, do they mean Republicans? Like, I don't know, Jimmy Stewart, or I don't know, like any of the 1950s, 1960s actors were fairly conservative. Like, come on. Yeah, the Hollywood elite, though. That's wild. Wild, crazy work. Although Texas Governor George W. Bush and former Wyoming Representative Dick Cheney campaigned in 2000 against Clinton's worst outrages, including the Utah Monument, there was no significant ratcheting back of DOI policies. They were either objected to by Westerners or contrary to the express provisions of federal statutes. President Barack Obama's DOI resumed the anti-economic federal lands policies activated by Carter and amplified by Clinton. However, Obama's DOI's antipathy to oil and gas activity on federal lands, as mandated by Congress, could not have come at a worse time.
No, God! No, God, please, no! 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 No!
After the demonstrated success of fracking on Bureau of Land Management acreage in Wyoming in 1993, the fracking revolution soon swept the nation, yielding massive discoveries, oh my God, on state and private land from coast to coast, but not thanks to Obama. Thanks, Obama, on Western federal lands. President Donald Trump, on the other hand, immediately ordered his DOI to comply with federal law and conduct congressionally mandated lease sales and seek to achieve energy dominance or independence. Thanks in part to the success of oil and gas operations on federal land in the West, the United States achieved energy security for the first time since 1957 in 2019. President Joe Biden's DOI, as is well documented, abandoned all pretense of complying with federal law regarding federally owned oil and gas resources. Not since the administration of President Harry S. Truman prior to creation of the OCS oil and gas program have fewer federal leases been issued. At DOI, not since the Reagan administration, was the radical environmental agenda, first implemented by Carter, resumed by Clinton, and revitalized by Obama, rolled back as substantially as it was by President Trump. Trump's DOI change affected not only oil and gas leasing as noted above, but all statutory responsibilities of its various agencies, bureaus, and offices. Thus, whether the statutory mandate was to promote economic activity, to ensure and expand recreational opportunities, or to protect valuable natural resources, including, for example, parks, wilderness areas, national monuments, and wild and scenic areas. Efforts were expended, barriers were removed, and career employees were aided in the accomplishment of those missions. Unfortunately, Biden's DOI is, break for my eyes really quick. Backing up. Unfortunately, Biden's DOI is at war, or was, this was written in 2023-ish, is at war with the department's mission, not only when it comes to DOI's obligation to develop the vast oil and gas and coal resources for which it is responsible, but also as to its statutory mandate, for example, to manage much of federal land overseen by the BLM pursuant to multiple use and sustained yield principles. Instead, Biden's DOI believes most BLM land should be placed off limits to all economic and most recreational uses. Worse yet, Biden's DOI not only refuses to adhere to the statutes enacted by Congress as to how the lands under its jurisdiction are managed, but it also insists on implementing a vast regulatory regime for which Congress has not granted authority, and overturning by unilateral regulatory action congressional acts that set forth the productive economic uses permitted on DOI-managed federal land. Budget structure at $18.9 billion. DOI's 2024 proposed budget is small relative to many other agencies. On the other side of the ledger, the DOI forecasts it will generate more than $19.6 billion in offsetting receipts from oil and gas royalties, timber and grazing park user fees, and land sales, among other sources. Much of the proposed allocations are divided among 9 bureaus. Bureau of Indian Affairs fulfills Indian trust responsibilities on behalf of 566 Indian tribes, supports natural resource education, law enforcement, and social service programs delivered by tribes, operates 182 elementary and secondary schools and dormitories, and 29 tribally controlled community colleges, universities, and post-secondary schools. Bureau of Land Management manages and conserves resources for 245 million acres of public land and 700 million acres of subsurface federal mineral estate, including energy and mineral development, forest management, timber and biomass production, and wild forest and burro management. My friend Joey got bit by a burro one time. You're okay, buddy. You're a good boy. One sec. I apologize. 1 second. He kept sticking his hand outside the vehicle to flick off a burro that was standing out there, and all of a sudden just got bit right on the middle finger. It's hilarious. I wish I was recording. He was so pissed. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management manages access to renewable and conventional energy resources of the Outer Continental Shelf. You okay, buddy? Hold on. You okay, Bubba? You're a good boy. I love you. You're such a good puppy. Anyway, sorry. Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. We have limited space here. What can I say? Manages access to renewable and conventional energy resources of the Outer Continental Shelf, including more than 6,400 fluid mineral leases on approximately 35 million OCS acres. Issues leases for 24% of domestic crude oil and 8% of domestic natural gas supply. Oversees lease and grant issuance for offshore renewable energy projects. Bureau of Reclamation manages, develops, and protects water and related resources, including 476 dams and 337 reservoirs. Delivers water to 1 in every 5 Western farmers. That is true. And more than 31 million people, is America's second largest producer of hydroelectric power. That is true. Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement regulates offshore oil and gas facilities in 1.7 billion acres of the Outer Continental Shelf, oversees oil spill response, supports research on technology for oil spill response. National Park Service maintains and manages 401 natural, cultural, and recreational sites, 26,000 historic structures, and more than 44 million acres of wilderness. Provides outdoor recreation, provides technical assistance and support to state and local programs, Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, regulates coal mining and site reclamation, provides grants to states and tribes for mining oversight, mitigates the effects of past mining. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service manages the 150 million acre National Wildlife Refuge System, manages 70 fish hatcheries and other related facilities for endangered species recovery. Protects migratory birds and some marine mammals. U.S. Geological Survey conducts scientific research in ecosystems, climate, and land use change. Mineral assessments, environmental health, and water resources. Produces information about natural hazards, earthquakes, volcanoes, and landslides. Leads climate change research for the department. Restoring American energy dominance. Drill, baby, drill. National parks. Got it. Cool. Alaska. Awesome. We're going to make Greenland part of America. Is that it? Part of the United States? Cool. Fun times. Restoring American energy dominance. Given the dire adverse national impact of Biden's war on fossil fuels, clean coal, you guys. No other initiative is as important for the DOI under a conservative president than the restoration of the department's historic role, managing the nation's vast storehouse of hydrocarbons, much of which is yet to be discovered. The U.S. depends on reliable and cheap energy resources to ensure the economic well-being of its citizens, the vitality of its economy, and its geopolitical standing in an uncertain and dangerous world. Not only are valuable natural resources owned generally by the American people involved, so too are those owned separately by American Indian tribes and individual American Indians, both of which have been injured by Biden's illegal actions. The federal government owns 61% of the onshore and offshore mineral estate of the U.S., but only 22% of the nation's oil and 12% of U.S. natural gas comes from those federal lands and waters, and even that amount is declining. Additionally, 42% of coal production takes place on federal lands in 11 states. DOI manages a subsurface mineral estate of 700 million acres onshore and 1.76 billion acres offshore for a total of 2.46 billion acres. The total land area of the U.S. is 2.263 billion acres. Private and state lands at 1.563 billion acres. Can you imagine that? Billions of acres? Anyway, make up only 39% of the total onshore and offshore subsurface area of the United States. Oil, natural gas, coal, and other minerals on federal lands and waters are managed by the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement. These agencies' responsibilities frequently overlap with resource management by the U.S. Forest Service in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, state governments, and private property owners. Biden is, quote, aligning the management of public lands and waters to support robust climate action, unquote, as envisioned in Executive Orders 14008 and 13990. One of his first actions was to ban federal coal, oil, and natural gas leasing on federal lands and waters to fulfill his campaign promise of no federal oil, followed by actions from Interior Secretary Deb Haaland to rescind the Trump administration, Part 1, energy dominance agenda. To this end, DOI unilaterally overhauled resource management plans, lease sales, fees, rents, royalty rates, bonding requirements, and permitting processes to prevent new production of coal, oil, and natural gas on federal lands and waters, to dramatically increase production of solar and wind energy, and to accomplish its 30 by 30 America the Beautiful agenda to remove federal lands from multiple, that is, productive use. Jesus Christ. DOI is abusing the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, processes, the Antiquities Act, and bureaucratic procedures to advance a radical climate agenda, ostensibly to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, for which DOI has no statutory responsibility or authority. The Federal Land Policy and Management Act, FLPMA, Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act, OSCLA, General Mining Law, and other congressional acts clearly set forth multiple use principles and processes that include production of coal, oil, and natural gas and other minerals as legitimate activities consistent with the welfare of all Americans and of environmental stewardship.
Bruh.
Biden's DOI is hoarding supplies of energy and keeping them from Americans whose lives could be improved to cheaper and more abundant energy while making the economy stronger and providing jobs opportunities for Americans. DOI is a bad manager of the public trust and has operated lawlessly in defiance of congressional statute and federal court orders. Administration priorities, rollbacks. A new administration, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. right now, must immediately roll back Biden's orders, reinstate the Trump era, Part 1, Trump Part 1. Energy dominance agenda, rescind Secretarial Order SO 3398 and review all regulations, orders, guidance documents, policies, and similar agency actions made in compliance with that order. Meanwhile, the new administration must immediately reinstate the following Trump DOI secretarial orders. Secretarial Order 3348 concerning the federal coal moratorium. Secretarial Order 3349. Sorry, one sec. Looking to see if the kitty needs help. I think she's okay for now. We're having some health issues, so trying to make sure that she doesn't have a long way to jump if she comes up. So, anyway, so I appreciate y'all's good vibes and well wishes. It means a lot. I'm not going to cry, so we're not going to talk about it right now, but I appreciate you guys. So, secretarial order, rather. Hello, I have words. I can talk. 3350. America First Offshore Energy Strategy, Secretarial Order 3351, strengthening the Department of the Interior's energy portfolio, Secretarial Order 3352, National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, Secretarial Order 3354, supporting and improving the federal onshore and oil and gas leasing program and federal solid mineral leasing program. Secretarial Order 3355, streamlining national environmental policy reviews and implementation of Executive Order 13807, establishing discipline and accountability in the environmental review and permitting process for infrastructure projects. Yikes, that sounds a little evil. Not gonna lie. Secretarial Order 3358, geez, there's a lot of these. Executive Committee for Expediting Permitting, Secretarial Order 3360, rescinding authorities inconsistent with Secretary's Order 3349, American Energy Independence, Secretarial Order 3380, public notice of the costs associated with developing Department of the Interior publications and similar documents. Secretarial Order 3385, enforcement priorities, and Secretarial Order 3389, coordinating and clarifying National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106 reviews. Actions. At the same time, the new administration, i.e., Donald Trump, part 2, right now, must reinstate quarterly onshore lease sales in all producing states according to the model of BLM's IM 2018-034, with a slight adjustment of including expanded public notice and comment. The new administration to work with Congress on legislation such as the Lease Now Act and Onshore Act to increase state participation and federal accountability for energy production on the federal estate. Conduct offshore oil and natural gas lease sales to the maximum extent permitted under the 2023-2028 lease program, with the possibility to move forward under a previously studied but unselected plan alternative. Develop immediately and finalize a new 5-year plan while working with Congress to reform the OCSLA by eliminating 5-year plans in favor. This is odd. This is strange wording, too, as well as an odd idea. Develop immediately and finalize a new 5-year plan while working with Congress to reform the OCSLA by eliminating 5-year plans in favor of a rolling or quarterly lease sales. So put out a new 5-year plan to get rid of 5-year plans, essentially. Review all resource management plans finalized in the previous 4 years, i.e. when Biden was president, and when necessary, select studied alternatives to restore the multi-use concept enshrined in FLPMA and to eliminate management decisions that advance the 30 by 30 agenda, set rents, royalty rates, and bond requirements to no higher than what is required under the Inflation Reduction Act. Comply with the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, ANILCA, and the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 to establish a competitive leasing and development program in the coastal plain. An area of Alaska that was set aside by Congress specifically for future oil and gas exploration and development. It is often referred to as the Section 1002 area after the section of ANILCA that excludes the area from Arctic National Wildlife Refuge's wilderness designation. Conclude the programmatic review of the coal leasing program and work with the congressional delegates and governors of Wyoming and Montana to restart the program immediately. Abandon withdrawals of lands from leasing in the Thompson Divide of the White River National Forest, Colorado, the 10-mile buffer around Chaco Cultural Historic National Park in New Mexico, restoring the compromise forged in the Arizona Wilderness Act and the Boundary Waters area in northern Minnesota if those withdrawals have not been completed. Pardon me. One sec. Just one moment. I apologize. Sorry about sorry about that. I was just taking some medication. Okay. Making sure we're still functional here. Yes, we are. Sorry. Anyway. This shit makes the weirdest sounds. I apologize. I'm just doing something with my camera. One quick second. Hold up. One moment. We're looking at properties here for my camera. All right. Moving back along. Can we see me? I think we can see me. Yeah, we can see me. I needed to make a little bit of lighting change there. So thanks for bearing with me. Back to it. So conclude the conclude the programmatic review of the coal leasing program and work with the congressional delegations and governors of Wyoming and Montana to restart the program immediately. Abandon withdrawals of lands from leasing in the Thompson Divide of the White River National Forest. In Colorado, the 10-mile buffer around Chaco Cultural Historic National Park in New Mexico. Restoring the compromise forged in the Arizona Wilderness Act in the Boundary Waters area in northern Minnesota if those withdrawals have not been completed. Jeez Louise, that's a lot. Meanwhile, revisit associated leases and permits for energy and mineral production in these areas in consultation with state elected officials. Require regional offices to complete right-of-way and drilling permits within the average time it takes states in the region to complete them. What the hell? Require regional offices to complete right-of-way and drilling permits within the average time it takes states in the region to complete them. That's odd. Weird phraseology. Anywho, rulemaking. The following policy reversals require rulemaking. Well, you don't say. Anyway, rescind rather the Biden rules and reinstate the Trump rules regarding sorry, that sounded like such a preschool ass argument. Yeah, get rid of your rules and put my rules back in. So BLM waste prevention is number one. Number two is the Endangered Species Act rules. Rules defining critical habitat and critical habitat exclusions. Number three, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And number four, CEQ reforms to NEPA. Reinstate President Trump's plan for opening most of the National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska to leasing and development. By whom? Jeez Louise. Anyway, personnel changes. The new administration to be able to draw on the enormous expertise of state agency personnel throughout the country who were capable and knowledgeable about land management and prove it daily. Oh, but they might be career officials, guys. That isn't all right. That isn't okay. We can't possibly have career officials who know things about stuff. Get rid of them. States are better resource managers than the federal government? Really? Because they must live with the results. The federal government has to literally live with the results too, bud. But okay, whatever. Fair enough. Splitting hairs, I guess, ish. President Trump's Schedule F proposal regarding accountability and hiring must be reinstituted to bring success to these reforms. So what? No career officials? Like, truly, that's where we're going? I was just making fun, but maybe that is where we're headed with this. Consistent with the theme of bringing successful state resource management examples to the forefront of federal policy, DOI should also look for opportunities to broaden state, federal, and tribal federal cooperative agreements. Immediate actions. BLM headquarters. BLM headquarters belongs in the American West. After all, the overwhelming majority of the 245 million surface acres, 10% of the nation's landmass, managed by the agency, lies in the 11 western states and Alaska. A mere 50,000 surface acres lie elsewhere. Moreover, 97% of BLM employees are located in the American West, thus the Trump administration's decision, and when they say the Trump administration, they're talking about the first Trump administration, just to be clear, to relocate BLM headquarters from Washington, D.C. to the West was the epitome of good governance. That is, it was not only well-informed, but it was also implemented efficiently, effectively, and with an eye toward effective career civil servants. Wait, I thought we didn't want those. I thought we were just talking about that. What? Career civil servants? Not okay. Ah.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Plus, despite overblown chatter from the inside the Beltway media, Congress with bipartisan support-approved funding move. Okay. Meanwhile, state, tribal, and local officials, the diverse collection of stakeholders, fair enough, who used public lands in western neighbors, became accustomed to having top BLM decision makers in Grand Junction, Colorado, rather than up to 4 time zones away. Look, on that one, I give it to them, fair enough. But I don't necessarily appreciate why they're doing this, right? It's like, in order to drill, baby, drill, essentially. I'm just making sure my mic is on right now. Okay. Yes, it is. So all of them also appreciated that the BLM's top subject matter experts were located not in the District of Columbia, but in the western states that most need their knowledge and expertise. Westerners no longer had to travel across country to address BLM issues. Neither did officials in the West closest to the resources and people they manage. On July 16, 2019, Secretary of the Interior David L. Bernhardt delivered to Congress the proposal for the relocation of nearly 600 BLM headquarters employees. On August 10, 2020, Secretary Bernhardt formally established Robert F. Burford headquarters, named after the longest-serving BLM director. Oh, that's nice. A Grand Junction native with a staff of 41 senior officials and assistants. Another 76 positions were assigned to the BLM state offices in western communities such as Billings, Montana, Boise, Idaho, Reno, Nevada, Salt Lake City, Utah, and Cheyenne, Wyoming, to meet critical needs. Scores of other positions were assigned to the states that required BLM expertise. For example, wild horse and burro professionals were relocated to Nevada, fair enough, home to nearly 60% of these Western icons. That's where my friend Joey was bitten, just saying. Don't flick off a burro out the window of your rental car, okay? That's the lesson here, really. Frankly, you're welcome. So, yeah, 60% of them are in states like Nevada. Okay, fairly received, fairly done, okay. You know, okay. All right. So I didn't know that wild horses, that 60% of wild horses were out that way too, but I guess that makes sense. Yeah, 60% of these Western icons. Yeah, okay. 61 physicians were retained in Washington, D.C. to address public, congressional, and regulatory affairs, Freedom of Information Act compliance, and budget development. Despite the dislocating impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the BLM successfully filled hundreds of long vacant positions. I'm so sorry. Pardon me. I'm having issues here. Ugh, so annoying. I'm going to back that up. I apologize. So, to address public, congressional, and regulatory affairs, Freedom of Information Act compliance, and budget development, rather, despite the dislocating impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the BLM successfully filled hundreds of long vacant positions, as well as those that opened because of the move west. The BLM saw notable numbers of applicants for these positions, so numerous that the BLM capped the number of eligible applicants to no more than 50. Interesting. Obviously, reduced commuting times, often from hours to mere minutes. Lower cost of living and opportunity to access vast public lands for recreational opportunities made these jobs attractive to potential employees. Many, if not most, applicants stated that they would not have applied had the positions been based in Washington, D.C. At the same time, Western positions attracted those with the skills needed to meet the BLM's multiple use, sustained yield mandate, or disproven claims the BLM was suffering a brain drain. The Trump administration recognized that despite its attractions, not everyone employed by the BLM in Washington, D.C. could move west. The administration applied a hands-on approach with all employee briefing and question and answer sessions, regular email communications, and a website devoted to frequently asked questions. A whole website devoted to FAQ? Are we talking about a web page? Like a page is part of the BLM site? Not a website. That's ridiculous. Get out of here. Get the fuck out of here with that. I don't believe it for a hot second. Anyway, well, actually, with the Trump administration, I do. That sounds like something they do. Anyway, 2 human resources teams aided employees wishing to remain in federal jobs in the DC area all received new opportunities. Okay. So they were shifted to other departments or other agencies, maybe? The BLM's move west incurred no legal challenges, no formal equal employment opportunity for U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board complaints, and no adverse union activity. It is hard to please everyone, but the Trump administration's BLM did just that. It kind of sounds like it did, though, not gonna lie. Putting the lie to assertions by some that the BLM was trying to fire federal employees. Oh, I bet it was, but it still sounds like the move west might have been beneficial in some regards. And that the benefits were, let's say, agreed upon by all sides of the aisle, basically. The total cost of $17.9 million for relocation incentives, permanent change of station moves, temporary labor, travel, printing, rent, supplies, equipment, and other contracts will save money for the American people. For example, in fiscal year 2020, the BLM estimated $1.6 million in travel cost savings, which will grow slightly over time, and $1.9 million in savings from its terminated lease in Washington, D.C. Furthermore, BLM established that by October 2022, the BLM move west would generate a net, a net savings of $3.5 million, which the following fiscal year would increase to $10.3 million. Pardon me. So, did that ever happen? Let's see. I'm just going to ask Claude. Hold on. Let's ask Claude. We'll just say, did this ever happen? My eyes are killing me. It's annoying. Yeah, let's do that. .md. Perfect. Perfect. Got it. You know, I might just spin up a server for us to all use. That might not be a bad idea. Anywho, we'll see if that ever happened. Moving on while we get that answer. Those funds can be devoted to reducing the risk of wildfires, increasing recreational opportunities, conserving public lands, and addressing tough issues such as wild horses and burros. Moreover, don't flick them off. I'm telling you guys, don't flick them off from your rental car. They will bite your middle finger. Moreover, those funds will be used more wisely thanks to the efficiency of senior season managers working closely with BLM field employees in near daily contact with Western officials, stakeholders, and neighbors. In late 2022, Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland announced the return of headquarters and scores of highly paid senior employees to Washington, D.C. Subsequently, BLM Director Tracy Stone Manning revealed 56 BLM jobs in BLM's Western headquarters and 70 other BLM jobs will remain in Grand Junction, an increase of 15 from the 41 announced by Trump's BLM in 2019. So, what was the problem? Anyway, moving on. Thus, the director, the 2 deputy directors, 6 of 7 assistant directors, ADs, and their staff are now or soon will be in Washington. Right, but it sounds elective, right? Like it sounds like something that you can do if you want. You don't have to, from what I'm understanding here. Anyway. The Biden administration failed to recognize the wisdom of having BLM's leadership, including its director, deputy directors, and the ADs in the West. That is why decades ago, the AD and staff in charge of BLM's firefighters were relocated to Boise, Idaho, where they remain. Not so the head of BLM Law Enforcement and Security, who supervises 200 uniformed, I almost said that as uninformed, uniformed law enforcement rangers and 76 special agents stationed mainly in 11 western states and Alaska. Haaland moved that official to Washington, far from state troopers, county sheriffs, and deputies and city police with whom BLM law enforcement officers keep the peace in the West's wide open spaces. BLM's top cop might as well be on the moon. The AD in charge of oil, gas, and minerals was also moved to Washington, D.C., notwithstanding the most oil, gas, and minerals are in the West and Alaska. New Mexico's Permian Basin, for example, is second only to Alaska in petroleum potential, and Montana and Wyoming's Powder River Basin contains the world's best low-sulfur coal. The AD responsible for wild horses and burros was moved east as well, despite the fact that the uncontrolled growth of wild horses and burros poses an existential threat. Oh, okay. I get it, like grazing and stuff, to public lands. 60% of the nation's wild horses are in Nevada, but thousands are in 9 other western states. There is no way these and other ADs can professionally manage issues thousands of miles and multiple time zones away. I mean, it's called delegation, but okay, fair enough. It is not just effective and responsive management that has been lost. Colorado lost its chance to become a must-visit destination for BLM's stakeholders. Anyway, those seeking to develop world-class mineral deposits in Minnesota or another Prudhoe Bay in Alaska. Yeah, that sounds great. To expand recreation across BLM's vast, diverse, and unique landscapes, or to manage timber and rangelands to prevent wildfires, would all journey to Grand Junction. Convention opportunities on Colorado's western slope would abound for BLM's disparate constituencies to congregate and meet with BLM leadership. The Western States Sheriff's Association, for example, whose annual gatherings attract hundreds of law enforcement officers from 17 western and plain states, might have moved its event to Grand Junction. Law enforcement officers in 2002, at the direction of the Secretary of the Interior, in the days following the 9/11 attack, in 2002? Okay. Anyhow, the days following the 9/11 attack, a year later, the Inspector General, IG, for DOI made a series of department-wide recommendations regarding law enforcement. Then Secretary of the Interior, Gail Norton, ordered adoption of those recommendations, which drew strong bipartisan support from Congress over the years. Most were implemented. One, however, remained undone. Placing all BLM law enforcement officers, LEOs, that is, it's 212 law enforcement rangers and 76 special agents in an exclusively law enforcement chain of command. This was not just the IG's recommendation in 2002, but that of every IG who followed. It is also the strong recommendation of the department's top LEO, law enforcement officer. Moreover, it has been the urgent recommendation of law enforcement professionals across the country, especially in the West, for decades, including the Western States Sheriff's Association. Unfortunately, over time, BLM leadership stonewalled adhering to a haphazard system in which LEOs reported to non-LEO superiors, including not only state directors, but also district and field managers with expertise in other fields. Range management or petroleum engineering, for example, with only 24 hours of law enforcement study. Obviously, those managers lack a comprehensive understanding of law enforcement issues, constitutional, legal, and tactical. That's probably true, though. In addition, they do not uniformly apply or enforce rules of conduct or ethical standards for LEOs, law enforcement officers, and special agents, leading to weakened esprit de corps and morale. Worse yet, because of their duties as managers of the multiple use lands under their jurisdiction, they are exposed to conflicts of interest and conflicts of interest, really? They're exposed to conflicts of interest. Looking askance at that one, but okay. And may intentionally or unintentionally prevent LEOs from investigating violations or applying the law. In the final days of the Trump administration, Secretary David L. Bernhardt ordered and Deputy Director William Perry Pendley implemented the IG's recommendation. Of course, leadership heads exploded. They were furious with their loss of authority, not to mention subordinates and budgets. Unfortunately, in the first days of the Biden administration, BLM Deputy Director Mike Ned suspended Pendley's order. Nonetheless, LEOs, that's law enforcement officers, the BLM and Westerners want LEOs who make life and death decisions to be as well trained and well equipped as possible. Oh God, not well equipped. I see where we're going with this. Give them army shit. They're an armed force. That's where we're going, I imagine. Anyway, they should report to a professional expert and knowledgeable chain of command. After all, they protect visitors to BLM lands and the natural and cultural resources of those lands, as well as the employees who manage those lands. BLM's LEOs must keep in touch, work closely, and coordinate with fellow federal, state, and local law enforcement. Sorry, lost my place. Okay, just local law enforcement. Interesting, dangerous. Wait, nope, hold on. Oh, yeah, no, that's right. BLM's LEOs must keep in touch, work closely, and coordinate with fellow federal, state, and local law enforcement officers. In the Trump administration, they joined state and local law enforcement. Interesting, dangerous suspects in Cortez, Colorado, responded to a request from a rural sheriff in Arizona to rescue a family stuck in freezing temperatures and teamed up in an all-hands-on-deck effort to locate a missing American Indian teenager in rural Montana. More important, not more importantly, just more important. Okay. Western LEOs need the assurance that the BLM LEOs with whom they work are professionals who report through a professional chain of command. Wild horses and burros. In 1971, Congress ordered the BLM to manage wild horses and burros to ensure their iconic presence never disappeared from the Western landscape. For decades, Congress watched as these herds overwhelmed the land's ability to sustain them, crowded out indigenous plant and other animal species, threatened the survival of species listed under the Endangered Species Act, invaded private and permitted public land, disturbed private property rights, and turned the sod into concrete. BLM experts said in 2019 that some affected land will never recover from this unmitigated damage. There are 95,000 wild horses and burros roaming nearly 32 million acres in the West, triple what scientists and land management experts say the range can support. These animals face starvation and death from lack of forage and water. I mean, that could be true for all I know. The population has more than doubled in just the past 10 years and continues to grow at a rate of 10 to 15% annually. This number includes the more than 47,000 animals the BLM has already gathered from public lands at a cost to the American taxpayer of nearly $50 million annually to care for them in off-range corrals. This is not a new issue. It is not just a Western issue. It is an American issue. What is happening to these once proud beasts of burden is neither compassionate nor humane, and what these animals are doing to federal lands and fragile ecosystems is unacceptable. In 2019, the American Association of Equine Practitioners and the American Veterinary Medication Association, two of the largest organizations of professional veterinarians in the world, issued a joint policy calling for further reducing overpopulation to protect the health and well-being of wild horses and burros on public lands. The National Wild Horse and Burro Advisory Board, a panel of 9 experts and professionals, convened to advise the BLM endorse the joint policy. Furthermore, animal welfare organizations, just looking to see if the kitty needs anything. Furthermore, animal welfare organizations such as the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, the Humane Society of the United States, recognizes the prosperity of wild horses and burros in public lands is threatened if herds continue to grow unabated. The BLM's multi-pronged approach in its 2020 report to Congress included expanded adoptions and sales of horses gathered from overpopulated herds, increased gathers, and increased capacity for off-range holding facilities and pastures, more effective use of fertility control efforts, and improved research in concert with the academic and veterinary communities to identify more effective contraceptive techniques and strategies. All of that will not be enough to solve the problem, however. Congress must enact laws permitting the BLM to dispose humanely of these animals. Immediate actions regarding Alaska. Alaska is a special case and deserves immediate action. When Alaska was admitted to the Union in 1959, nearly its entire landmass was federally owned. Therefore, Alaska was granted the right to select 104 million acres out of 375 million acres to manage for the benefit of its residents. In less than 8 years, Alaska selected 26 million acres. Then Interior Secretary Stuart Udall, who served during the Kennedy and Johnson administrations, put a freeze on further land selections to protect any claims that might be asserted by Native Alaskans. Fair enough. The Alaskan Native Claims Settlement Act, the discovery of soil at Prudhoe Bay in 1968, made resolution of the issue by careful baby Chooch. Sorry. Come on up, baby. Here, are you okay? Come on up, my love. Come on up, baby. Come on. Oh, there she is. There's our precious baby. There's our patient. There's the patient herself. There she is. Okay, honey, take your time. Steady yourself. There you go. Okay, you're good. You're safe. You okay, baby? Okay, honey, I love you. I love you, Anna. Oh, my little baby. Why don't you go sit over on Mommy's right? Mwah! I love you. Wanna go sit over on Mommy's right? One sec, guys. We gotta make sure the baby's all situated. We gotta make sure the baby gets situated. Yeah, we do. We wouldn't want the baby to be uncomfortable. I know those pants are super slippery. It's okay, baby. You wanna sit on Mommy's lap? Oh, you little shit stick of a kitty. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Okay. So there is my baby. There she is. Oh, guys. So anyway, my baby's here. Interesting here. Made resolutions that issued by Congress in matter of urgency as a wow. Okay. Put a freeze on. Yeah. Okay. So we went to Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. The discovery of oil at Prudhoe Bay in 1968 made resolutions issued by Congress in matter of urgency. As a result, in 1971, Congress passed the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA, which allowed the Native community to select 44 million acres. Environmentalists upset that too much of the land they coveted would be selected by the state and Native Alaskans for development. Demanded the inclusion in the Act of a provision, Section 17D2, that ordered the Interior Secretary to withdraw 80 million acres for future designation by Congress as parks, refuges, wild and scenic rivers, and national forests. The deadline for this congressional action was 1978, and as it neared, the Carter administration, impatient and worried, decided to force. Wow, that's totally unbiased language there, guys. Decided to force Congress's hand. The administration unilaterally withdrew 100 million acres from any use by the state or Native Alaskans. Alaska promptly sued, charging that the administration had failed to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act. In a lame duck session at the end of 1980, Congress passed over the objections of the Alaskan delegation the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, which revoked all of the withdrawals of the Carter administration and substituted congressional designations that put. Sorry, I gotta scroll. And substituted congressional designations that put 100 million acres permanently in the federal enclaves, doubled the acreage of national parks and refuges, and tripled the amount of land declared to be wilderness. Through all of this, Alaska pressed for the DOI to convey the lands to which Alaska was entitled by federal law, but the department grudgingly transferred only portions of that land. By the time Ronald Reagan, our Lord and Savior, that part wasn't in there, emphasis mine, took office, Alaska had received less than half the lands to which it was entitled after its admission into the Union, and Native Alaskans had received only 1/3 of the land due to them. From January of 1981 through 1983, however, under Reagan, Alaska received 30 million acres and a commitment of land transfers at the rate of 13 million acres annually. In the same period, Native Alaskans received 11 million acres, which constituted nearly 60% of their entitlement, and an additional 15 million acres were transferred by the end of 1988. You've lay over here if you want, baby. That might be a good place to lay. I think that might be a good place for kitten to lay. That's up to you, baby. We're just trying to keep the kitten comfortable here. You can lay over here if you want, or wherever. I love you. Baby Chooch. I love you. You're mommy's baby. Oh, my darling. My baby. Now let's go see what the answer to the question we asked Claude was. So again, the question I had asked was, did this ever happen? And then I copied and pasted the bit from Project 2025. I said, for example, in fiscal year 2020, the BLM estimated $1.6 million in travel cost savings, which will grow slightly over time, and $1.9 million in savings from its terminated lease in Washington, D.C. Furthermore, BLM estimated that by October 2022, the BLM move west would generate a net savings of $3.5 million, which the following fiscal year would increase to $10.3 million. So no, that did not happen. And it's not, you okay, baby? Then it says, short answer, no, not in any way that got to prove out. What actually happened chronologically was that the move to Grand Junction started under the first Trump administration, 2019 to 2020, with then Interior Secretary Bernhardt and acting BLM director, acting, of course, William Perry Pendley, pushing it through. GAO reviewed the relocation in March 2020 and found that the agency's cost-benefit analysis didn't include key information. It didn't establish performance measures at all, and the cost analysis excluded things like travel costs from all the new staff locations and the effect of relocation on productivity. In other words, GAO looked at exactly this kind of savings math and said it wasn't solid enough to trust. Well, would you look at that? Okay. Of the 328 positions slated to move, only 41 people actually relocated, and just 3 of those went to Grand Junction itself. More senior staff quit rather than move, which is the opposite of what a savings projection assumes. Okay, you're not saving money if you have to backfill and retrain a bunch of departed staff. You okay, baby? Then Biden's Interior Department reversed the move. Yeah, okay, in September 2021. Interesting. Moving HQ back to DC and downgrading Grand Junction to a Western headquarters. Fair enough. So the specific numbers that were quoted, they weren't met. They weren't met. That's interesting. Okay. It says that there's been talk of moving the headquarters back west, right? But that it hasn't really materialized in Trump's second term. But let's double check on that. Oof. Back over here, by the time Ronald Reagan took office, Alaska had received less than half the lands to which it was entitled. Like we said, after its administration into the Union, and Native Alaskans had received only 1/3 of the land due to them from January of 1981 through 1983. However, under Reagan, Alaska received 30 million acres and a commitment of land transfers at a rate of 13 million acres annually. In the same period, Native Alaskans received 11 million acres, which constituted nearly 60% of their entitlement, and an additional 15 million acres were transferred by the end of 1988. Just revisiting that. Okay, now we've got, you're a good girl. You just curl up, my love. You're safe. You're okay, honey. Anna, you're okay. Little baby. My little choochie. Oh, my darling. You just get comfy over there, okay? You just get comfy, okay? She doesn't always like the moving of the chair. My poor baby. Oh, got cat fur in my eye. That's okay. Anna is worth it. You're okay. You just lay down over there, okay, baby? Now, just lay down. You're okay. You're all right, my darling. You just lay right down over there. It's okay. You're safe, my baby. You're safe, my darling. You're safe, my lovey. She's the prettiest baby kitten. Yes, he is. Sorry, baby. You crawl up. You're okay. You're okay, baby. You alright? Her arthritis makes it really painful for her to curl up like that. You're safe, darling. You're okay, Anna. Mommy's here. Your best friend, Mom, is here. Your best friend, Mommy, is here. She's got you. Poor baby. Good girl. There you are. There you go, baby. Despite the passage of nearly 40 years since the end of the Reagan administration, the federal government has yet to fulfill its statutory obligation to Alaska and Alaskan Natives. Specifically, each group has 5 million acres of entitlement remaining. Standing in the way are public land orders, PLOs issued by the BLM seizing the land for the agency. Those PLOs must be lifted to permit Alaska and Alaskan Natives to select what was promised by Congress. Yeah, this couldn't have anything to do with their desire to drill on it, could it? Could it? No, not possible. For example, revocation of PLO 5150 will provide the state of Alaska 1.3 million acres. Oh, you okay? Are you just trying to get comfy? Yeah? Okay. My love. Oh, baby. Sorry, guys. One sec. We gotta make sure the darling kitty is okay. Okay. Oh, you're just okay. I see. There you go. For example, revocation of PLO 5150 will provide the state of Alaska 1.3 million acres of its remaining state entitlement. This revocation should be a top priority. BLM recommended this revocation in the 2006 report to Congress based on the Alaska Land Transfer Acceleration Act, and the Interior Secretary has authority to revoke based on the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act under Section D1. Remember, we talked about D2 earlier. All other remaining BLM PLOs, of which are more than 50 years, all of which, are more than 50 years old, should be revoked immediately. Alaska has untapped potential for increased oil production. I knew it. Increased oil production, which is important not just as a revitalization of the nation's energy sector, but it is vital to the Alaskan economy. 1/4 of Alaska's jobs are in the oil industry, and half of its overall economy depends on that industry. Without oil production, the Alaskan economy would be half its size. A new administration, meaning Donald Trump right now, must take the following actions immediately. Approve the 2020 Initial Petroleum Reserve Alaska Integrated Activity Plan and PRA IAP by re-signing the record of decision. Secretary Helen's order reverted to the 2013 IAP, the science for which is out of date, unlike the 2020 IAP. Reinstate the 2020 Arctic National Wildlife Refuge Environmental Impact Statement, EIS, by secretarial order, and lift the suspension of the leases. Approve the 2020 Willow EIS, the largest pending oil and gas production in the United States and the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, and expand approval from 3 to 5 drilling pads. Minerals. Alaska is not just blessed with an abundance of oil, it has vast untapped mineral potential. Therefore, the new administration must immediately approve the Ambler Road. Oh, sorry, Kitty. You got itchies in your ears. The Ambler Road project across BLM managed lands pursuant to the Secretary's authority under the ANI-LCA and based on the final environmental impact statement on the project. This will permit construction of a new 211-mile roadway on the south side of the Brooks Range. Carefully, Kitty, carefully, my love. One sec. West from the Dalton Highway to the south bank of the Ambler River, and open the area only to mining-related industrial uses, providing high-paying jobs in an area known for unemployment. Gosh, that's bleak. Okay, one sec. We've just got to make sure she's safe and feeling well. One moment. You okay, Anna? You okay, baby? Are you okay, my love? You're right. Mommy's here. You're okay. Anna's safe. Anna's okay. Mommy's just gonna move this over for her. There she goes. Okay, careful, 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 careful. There you go, my darling. There you go, my little favorite. There you go, my love. Oh my goodness, you're so precious. Do you want a little churro? Here, you want a little churro? Yeah. Give her some churro here. Good girl. Good girl, Anna. What a good girl to eat that. Good girl. I adore you, Anna. Mommy just utterly adores you. Yep, she adores you utterly. And Toby, I adore you utterly too. Mm-hmm. And I adore Finny utterly. Yes, I love those babies. Give him a baby. A little bit of churu. I've got cat fur in my mouth. That's okay. Good girl, my darling. I'm just glad she's eating it. Blessed be. Okay, so approve the 20. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Reinstate the 2020 Arctic National Wildlife Refuge Environmental Impact Statement (EIS) by secretarial order and lift the suspension of leases. Approve the 2020 Willow EIS for the largest pending oil and gas project in the United States in the National Petroleum, if I could speak, Reserve Alaska, and extend approval from 3 to 5 drilling pads. Minerals Alaska is not just blessed with an abundance of oil, it has vast untapped mineral potential. Therefore, the new administration must immediately approve the, again, new administration meaning Donald Trump meaning right now, Ambler Road project across BLM managed lands pursuant to the Secretary's authority under the ANI-LCA and based on the final environmental impact statement on the project. You're not going to eat it all? Okay, we'll come back and eat it when you're ready. She ate a bunch of it and then just left the rest. You okay? Okay. Anna, are you okay? You okay? You alright, baby? I apologize, guys. I gotta really look after her here. Are you okay, my love? Are you okay, my darling? Are you okay, my baby? Where'd you go? Where is he? You okay? You alright? There he is. Is he okay? I just have to keep a close eye on her. She had an emergency procedure the other day and she's had some health setbacks. She's doing much better, but I'm really, really concerned. And the vet was clear that essentially we're buying time, right? And allowing her to hopefully still have that like enjoyment out of life, right? She's one of my special needs babies, so it's been hard. I'm just checking on her. Anyway, okay. So approve the 2020 Willow EIS, the largest pending oil and gas project in the United States in the National Petroleum Reserve Alaska, and expand approval from 3 to 5 drilling pads. Minerals Alaska is not just blessed with an abundance of oil, it has vast untapped mineral potential. Therefore, the new administration must immediately approve the Ambler Road project across BLM managed lands pursuant to the Secretary's authority under the ANI-LCA and based on the final environmental impact statement on the project. This will permit construction of a new 211-mile roadway on the south side of the Brooks Range, west from the Dalton Highway to the south bank of the Ambler River, and open the area only to mining-related industrial uses. Hi, baby. I love you. Oh, my baby. The mining area, industrial uses. Good girl. Be careful. You jumped right into your churu, but that was a graceful jump. Here, you want to eat that? No. It's up to you, baby. You don't want to eat that? Why don't you eat the rest of it? That's just your churu. Good girl. There you go. Eat some of it. Good girl, my love. Good girl, my darling. I love you. I love you, Anna. Oh my goodness, so precious. That's okay. You can get churu on me. I don't mind. I don't mind, honey. Come here. Come on. There's my baby. There's my darling. There she is. Alaska is not just blessed with an abundance of oil, it is blessed with mineral potential. Therefore, the new administration must immediately approve the Embler Road project across BLM managed lands pursuant to the Secretary's authority under the ANI-LCA and based on the final environmental impact statement on the project. This will permit construction of a new 211-mile roadway on the south side of the Brooks Range, west from the Dalton Highway to the south bank of the Ambler River, and open the area only to mining-related industrial uses, providing high-paying jobs like we said in an area known for unemployment. Wildlife and waters. Throughout Alaska's history, the federal government has treated Alaska as less than a sovereign state. This is especially the case when it comes to two of Alaska's most valued resources, its wildlife and its waters. Immediate action is required to end, at least in part, this injustice. A new administration should, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. right now, revoke National Park Service and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service rules. Good. Queen knows your tootsies off, huh? Mwah. Regarding predator control and bear baiting, which are matters for state regulation, such revocation is permitted under the 2017 Congressional Review Act. Okay. Recognize Alaska's authority to manage fish and game on all federal lands in accordance with ANI-LCA. During the Reagan administration, when each DOI agency in Alaska signed a memorandum of understanding with the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, ceding to the state the lead on fish and wildlife management matters, issue a secretarial order declaring navigable waters in Alaska to be owned by the state so that the lands beneath these waters belong to Alaska. This will force the BLM to prove the water is not navigable, since in the case of non-navigability, so prove that water, not prove that water, prove that that specific water, I guess, is not navigable. Since in the case of non-navigability, any submerged lands belong to the BLM. Currently, BLM requires Alaska to prove navigability at its own expense, including the BLM's preposterous assertion that the mighty Yukon River is not navigable. Reinstate President Trump's 2020 Alaska roadless rule for the Tundgrass National Forest in Alaska, which was replaced by a Biden roadless rule that continues a 2001 Clinton rule affecting 9.37 million of the forest's 16.7 million acres. The Clinton rule affects an area where communities are in small islands with no road access. It has prevented multiple infrastructure projects, including roads, electric transmission lines, and water and sewer projects, and it forces residents to use a heavily subsidized ferry system. Logging has been shut down to the extent that New York harvests more timber than does all of Alaska. Well, New York is not just New York City, it's New York State. Like, I don't know what to say. Of course, it's going to harvest a decent amount of timber. Come on. And we just talked about native lands and all of that, too. Come on now. Other actions. The 30 by 30 plan, President Biden's Executive Order 14008, 30 by 30, requires that the federal government, which already owns 1/3 of the country, remove vast amounts of private property from productive use and to end congressionally mandated use of all federal land. The end result will be total federal control of an additional 440 million acres of land or oceans in the U.S. by 2030. Okay, baby. Although the new president should vacate that order, i.e., Donald Trump, i.e., right now, DOI under a conservative president must take immediate action on the 30 by 30 plan by vacating a secretarial order issued by the Biden DOI that eliminated the Trump administration's requirement for the approval of state and local governments before federal acquisition of private property with monies from the Land and Water Conservation Fund. National monument designations, as has every Democratic president before him, beginning with Jimmy Carter. Wow, they sure don't like Jimmy Carter, do they? Joe Biden has abused his authority under the Antiquities Act of 1906, like the outrageous unilateral withdrawal from public use of multiple use federal land under the Carter, Clinton, and Obama administrations. Biden's first national monument was one in Colorado, adopted over the objections of scores of local groups and at least one American Indian tribe. In the days before the 2024 election, Biden will likely designate more Western monuments. Doubt it. Don't think that happened. Anyway, although President Trump courageously ordered a review of national monument designations, the result of that review was insufficient in that only 2 national monuments in one state, Utah, were adjusted. Monuments in Maine and Oregon, for example, should have been adjusted downward given the finding of Secretary Ryan Zinke's review that they were improperly designated. Oh, my baby. The new administration's review will permit a fresh look at past monument decrees and new ones by President Biden. Furthermore, the new administration must vigorously defend the downward adjustments it makes to permit a ruling on a president's authority to reduce the size of national monuments by the U.S. Supreme Court. Finally, the new administration must seek repeal of the Antiquities Act of 1906, which permitted emergency action by a president long before the statutory authority existed for the protection of special federal lands, such as those with wild and scenic rivers, endangered species specials, okay? I assume they mean endangered species, or other unique places. My nose ring's getting goofy on me. Moreover, in recent years, Congress has designated as national monuments those areas deserving of such congressional action. Oregon and California Lands Act. One national monument worthy of downward adjustments is in Oregon, where its designation and subsequent expansion interfere with the federal obligation to residents to harvest timber on its BLM lands. A federal district court ruled in 2019 that land subject to the Oregon and California ONC Grant Lands Act of 1937 was set aside by Congress to be harvested for the benefit of the people of Oregon. Specifically, those federal lands are to be, quote, managed for permanent forest production, unquote, and its timber, quote, sold, cut, and removed in conformity with the principle of sustained yield, unquote. As the district concluded, beginning in 1990, the federal government erected a trifecta of legal barriers to the accomplishment of the congressional mandate, beginning with a response to the listing of the northern spotted owl, continuing a decade later with the designation of the Cascade Siskiyou, the Cascade Siskiyou National Monument, and concluding in 2017 with an expansion of that monument. In order to fulfill the yet unaltered congressional mandate contained in federal law to provide for jobs and well-paying employment opportunities in rural Oregon and to ameliorate the effects of wildfires, the new administration must immediately fulfill its responsibilities and manage the ONC lands for permanent forest production to ensure that the timber is sold, cut, and removed. And EPA reforms. Congress never intended for the National Environmental Policy Act to grow into tree killing, project dooming. What? Sorry, Congress never intended for the National, good girl, kitty, environmental, I've got cat fur in my nose, Policy Act to grow into the tree killing, project dooming, decade spanning monstrosity that it has become. Instead, in 1970, Congress intended a short, succinct, timely presentation of information regarding major federal action that significantly affects the quality of the human environment so that decision makers can make informed decisions to benefit the American people. The Trump administration adopted common sense NEPA reforms that must be restored immediately. Meanwhile, DOI should reinstate the secretarial orders adopted by the Trump administration, Part 1, such as placing time and page limits on NEPA documents and setting forth on page 1 the costs of the document itself. Wow, nice. Good girl. I'm talking to the cat, by the way, the kitty. Meanwhile, the new administration should call upon Congress to reform NEPA to meet its original goal. Consideration should be given, for example, to eliminating judicial review. You okay, baby? Of the adequacy of NEPA documents or the rectitude of NEPA decisions. This would allow Congress to engage in effective oversight of federal agencies when prudent. Settlement transparency. Interior Secretary David Bernhardt required DOI to prominently display and provide open access to any and all litigation settlements into which DOI or its agencies entered. And any attorney's fees paid for ending the litigation. Biden's DOI aware that the settlements into which it planned to enter and the attorney's fees it was likely to pay would cause controversy, ended this policy. A new administration should reinstate it. The Endangered Species Act. The Endangered Species Act was intended to bring endangered and threatened species back from the brink of extinction and, when appropriate, to restore real habitat critical to the survival of the species. The Act's success rate, however, is dismal. Pardon me. Its greatest deficiency, according to one renowned expert, is conflict of interest. Specifically, the work of the Fish and Wildlife Service is a product of species cartels. Okay. Species cartels, afflicted with groupthink, confirmation bias, and a common desire to preserve the prestige, power, and appropriations of the agency that pays or employs them. For example, in one highly influential sage grouse monograph, 41% of the authors were federal workers. The editor, a federal bureaucrat, had authored 1/3 of the paper. Meaningful reform of the Endangered Species Act requires that Congress take action to restore its original purpose and end its use to seize private property, prevent economic development, and interfere with the rights of states over their wildlife populations. In the meantime, the new administration should take the following immediate action. Delist the grizzly bear in the greater Yellowstone and Northern Continental Divide ecosystems and defend the Supreme Court of the United States, the agency's fact-based decision to do so. Delist the gray wolf in the lower 48 states in light of its full recovery under the ESA. Cede to Western states jurisdiction over the greater sage grouse, recognizing the on-the-ground expertise of states and preventing use of the sage grouse to interfere with public access to public land and economic activity. Direct the Fish and Wildlife Service to end its abuse of Section 10J of the ESA by reintroducing so-called experiment species. Yeah, I don't buy that that's happening. Anyway, populations into areas that no longer qualify as habitat and lie outside the historic ranges of those species, which brings with it the full weight of the ESA in areas previously without federal government oversight. Direct the Fish and Wildlife Service to design and implement an impartial conservation triage program by prioritizing the allocation of limited resources. Sorry, just checking on the kitty. To maximize conservation returns relative to the conservation goals under a constrained budget. Direct the Fish and Wildlife Service to make all data used in ESA decisions available to the public with limited or no exceptions to fulfill the public's right to know and to prevent the agency's previous opaque decision-making. Abolish the Biological Resources Division of the U.S. Geological Survey and obtain necessary scientific research about species of concern from universities via competitive requests for proposals. So basically privatize it, but just in a different way. Direct, hi baby, the Fish and Wildlife Service to design and implement the Endangered Species Act program that ensures independent decision-making by ending reliance on so-called species specialists who have obvious self-interest, ideological bias, and land use agendas, and to ensure conformity with the Information Quality Act. Office of Surface Mining. The Office of Surface Mining Reclamation and Enforcement, OSM, was created by the Surface Mining Control and Reclamation Act of 1977, SMCRA, to administer programs for controlling the impacts of surface coal mining operations. Wow, you don't say. Although the coal industry is contracting, coal constitutes 20% of the nation's electricity and is the mainstay of many regional economies. The following actions should ensure OSM's ability to perform its mission while complying with SMCRA and without interfering with the production of high-quality American coal. Relocate the OSM Reclamation and Enforcement headquarters to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. To recognize that the agency is field-driven and should be headquartered in the coal field. Reduce the number of field coal reclamation inspectors. To recognize the industry is smaller. Reissue Trump's Schedule F executive order to permit discharge of non-performing employees. Jesus Christ, do away with workers' rights while you're at it. Permit coal company employees to benefit from the OSM training program, which is currently restricted to state and federal employees. Revise the applicant violator system, the nationwide database for the federal and state programs to permit federal and state regulators to consider extenuating circumstances. Maintain the current 10-day notice rule, which requires OSM to work with state regulators in determining if I think they meant N, but SMCRA violations taken place in recognition of the fact that a coal mining state with primacy has the lead in implementing state and federal law. Preserve Directive INE 26, which relates to approximate original contour, a critical factor in permitting efficient and environmentally sound surface mining, especially in Appalachia. Western water issues. The American West from the Great Plains to the Cascades Range is arid and as recognized by John Wesley Powell during his famous trip across a large part of its length, pursuant to an executive order signed by President Trump and consistent with its authority along with other federal agencies. DOI's Bureau of Reclamation must take the following actions. Develop additional storage capacity across the arid West, including by updating, number one, dam water control manuals for those damn water control manuals, you guys, for existing facilities during routine operations, and number two, engaging in real-time monitoring of operations, reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies by consolidating federal water working groups, implement actions identified in the Federal Action Plan for improving forecasts of water availability, especially by adopting improvements related to one, forecast-informed reservoir operations, and two, aerial snow observation systems. Aerial, ARIAL. Clarify the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act to ensure a consistent application with other federal infrastructure loan programs under the Federal Credit Reform Act. This should be done to foster opportunities for locally led investment in water infrastructure, reinstate presidential memorandum on promoting the reliable supply and delivery of water in the West, American Indians and U.S. trust responsibility. The Biden administration has breached its federal trust responsibilities to American Indians. This is unconscionable. Specifically, the Biden administration's war on domestically available fossil fuels. Yeah, it's really hurting those native people. And mineral sources has been devastating, to wit, the ability of American Indians and tribal governments to develop their abundant oil and gas resources has been severely hampered, depriving them of the revenue and profits to which they are entitled during a time of increasing worldwide energy prices, forcing American Indians, who are among the poorest Americans, to choose between food and fuel. What is this? The fucking, like, flower moon? Like, what? Anyway, yeah, what is this? Seriously, is this 1906 or some shit? Indian nations with significant coal resources and some of the highest quality and cleanest burning coal in the world. Oh, clean coal. Okay, good. Not the dirty kind, then. But the Biden administration has sought to destroy the market for their coal by eliminating coal-fired electricity in the country and prevent the transport of their coal for sale internationally. Meanwhile, the Biden administration, at great public expense, artificially boosted the demand for electric vehicles, which, because of their remote locations, the absence of increased electricity demands for charging electric vehicles nearby, and the distances to be traveled are not a choice for Indian communities. A significant percentage of critical minerals needed by the United States is on Indian lands, but the Biden administration has actively discouraged development of critical mineral mining projects on Indian lands rather than assisting in their advancement, despite Indian nations having primary responsibility for their lands and environment and responsibility for the safety of their communities. The Biden administration is reversing efforts to put Indian nations in charge of the environmental regulation of their own lands. Moreover, Biden administration policies, including those of the DOI, have disproportionately impacted American Indians and Indian nations. By its failure to secure the border, the Biden administration has robbed Indian nations on or near the Mexican border of safe and secure communities while permitting them to be swamped by a tide of illegal drugs, particularly fentanyl. Oh, that couldn't have anything to do with like the war on drugs, though, right? That's just like Biden. Got it. When ending COVID protocols at Bureau of Indian Education Schools, BIE, Biden's DOI failed to ensure an accurate accounting of students returning from school shutdowns, which presents a significant danger to the families that trust their children to that federal agency. The BIE is not reporting student academic assessment data to ensure parents and the larger tribal communities know their children are learning and are receiving a quality education. The new administration, i.e. Donald Trump, i.e. right now, part 2, must take the following actions to fulfill the nation's trust responsibilities to American Indians and Indian nations and the war on fossil fuels and domestically available minerals and facilitate their development on lands owned by Indians and Indian nations and federal mandates and subsidies of electric vehicles, restore the right of tribal governments to enforce environmental regulation on their land, secure the nation's border to protect the sovereignty and safety of tribal lands. So basically, here are some excuses that we're going to essentially put on the Native population to do a bunch of our bullshit. Anyway, overhaul BIE schools to put parents and their children first. So, vouchers, got it. Finally, the new administration should seek congressional reauthorization of the land buyback program for tribal nations, which provided a $1.9 billion trust land consolidation fund to purchase fractional interests in trust or restricted land from willing sellers at fair market value, but which sunsets November 24th, 2022. New funds should... one sec, guys. Sorry. Absolutely not. Sorry. Kids are beating the shit out of each other in my yard. Finally, the new administration should seek congressional reauthorization of the land buyback program from national tribal nations, which provided a $1.9 billion trust land consolidation fund to purchase fractional interests in trust or restricted land from willing sellers at fair market value, but which sunsets November 24th, 2022. New funds should come from the Great American Outdoors Act. Ridiculous. Really quick, let's see what the answer to our follow-up question was from Claude. Okay, so some of the changes that we were talking about at HUD were back in motion, but through Congress this time, not executive order, and still haven't been done. Okay, got it. That's good. That's good to know. What's on the table right now is the Local Act, HR 1125, introduced by Jeff Hurd from Grand Junction in February 2025, which would relocate BLM headquarters back to Grand Junction and a new twist, bar future presidents from moving it out of the area without congressional approval. That congressional lock provision is clearly a direct response to what happened last time. Trump did it by Secretary's order in 2019. Biden undid it by Secretary's order in 2021. Hurd's bill tries to make it stick by statute instead of leaving it to executive whim. Mesa County commissioners sent a formal letter of support for the Local Act to Hurd in April 2026, pushing Congress to pass it as of the most recent reporting available. Right, there was only a March 2026 update on the GJ Sentinel piece. Jesus Christ. This information is from the GJ Sentinel, Grand Junction Sentinel. As of the most recent reporting, the bill is still sitting in committee, no floor vote confirmed yet. So, no movement via unilateral executive action so far in Trump's second term. And no new secretary's order relocating BLM headquarters has been issued as of what we're able to find. So I'm just going to kind of power through this. I'm going to probably log off. I'm not sure if it'll be for the night or not, but I've got to feed my animals and go tell those kids no beating the hell out of each other with shoes in my backyard. Okay, so then we'll come back and do Department of Justice with Gene Hamilton again, either tonight or tomorrow.